welcome back to Coffee Talk, where we sit down, chill out, and do some real talk about ADHD, depression, and anxiety. I'm Haley's Comment. I make videos every Tuesday about mental health, and then on Thursdays, just random fun videos, whatever I feel like. Please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, so there's this misconception that people with ADHD just can't focus, which is just so untrue, and I get why people think that, especially the name. The name makes it sound like we have, you know, a low capacity to focus, which is not true, all right? It's like an irregularity in your ability to focus. People with ADHD experience hyperfocus. Now, you don't need to have experienced hyperfocus in order to be diagnosed with ADHD. However, I have never met a person who has ADHD that has not experienced hyperfocus. So I think it's just kind of a matter of time for them adding that into the criteria to be diagnosed. Today, I just kind of wanted to describe what it feels like because I feel like if you read what hyperfocus is, a lot of people who don't have ADHD might be like, oh my gosh, I must have ADHD. It's more than just an intense focus. Okay, I should probably backtrack. So hyperfocus, in general, it's kind of described as intense focus, but it's so much more than that. It's not just intense focus. It's super epic intense focus that's uncontrollable. So I used to think that I had bipolar disorder or bipolar 2. If you guys don't know too much about bipolar disorder, basically, bipolar 1, you experience mania, and that's kind of what people more so think of as bipolar disorder. But bipolar 2 is hypomania. You're still manic, but it's not quite as intense, and a lot of times people channel that as being obsessed with a project and will just work for hours at a time and all that. And hypomania and hyperfocus are very similar on paper. I'm sure that they feel different. I couldn't really speak from experience because I don't have bipolar disorder. I've looked into it. Reading the symptoms, it sounds a lot like hyperfocus, but I'm sure that it feels different if you actually experience it. That's the thing with a lot of mental health issues, especially like bipolar disorder and ADHD, autism and ADHD, like the symptoms are almost identical, but the way someone feels when they experience those symptoms are different. Gabby Hanna is actually another example. She used to think that she had bipolar disorder, and she used to even claim that she did have bipolar disorder despite not being diagnosed. She's also been diagnosed with ADHD. I think that's what she was experiencing because she would talk about how she could just work for hours and hours and hours. Well, it was just her hyperfocus. Because she has said that she went to the psychiatrist, like told them she thinks she has bipolar disorder, and they always tell her no. So yeah, hyperfocus. It's exactly what it sounds like, but more intense. You can be focused for hours to weeks at a time. Usually it's shorter increments, but there's definitely been times where I've been focused for like an extended period of time, like almost an entire month of me being incredibly focused, always wanting to do the same thing. And it's not something that you can choose. So I usually hyperfocus on editing videos or writing, and it's usually something that piques your interest, but it's not like you can just choose, okay, I'm gonna hyperfocus now. It's just random. Oftentimes, it's something creative that people will hyperfocus on, which I think kind of explains why a lot of YouTubers have ADHD.
I looked up Scratch That, Reverse It, Willy Wonka to put in that little bit right there, and it's Strike That, Reverse It.
Mandela effect. People with ADHD are really creative, and then if you could hyperfocus on something like editing, that's what's gonna make a good YouTuber, you know? A lot of people don't have the patience for things like editing because it's very tedious, but if you're hyper-focused on it and all you can do is like edit, you're gonna crank out content like it's nothing. So yeah, you'll just be doing it and hours will pass and it will feel like minutes. I'll be editing and I'll look at the clock and like, this is me like using my touchpad anyway, but yeah, I'll just be editing. It'll seem like, okay, maybe it's been like 20 minutes and I'll be getting a lot of things done. I just have a bad sense of time anyway, which is an ADHD thing, but especially when I'm hyper-focused, I'll just look at the clock and I'll be like, oh my goodness gracious, how did so much time pass without me noticing? I've just been sitting in the same position, hunched over my computer, haven't eaten, haven't gone to the bathroom, haven't gotten ready for the day. I'm just editing, editing, editing. I need to like shower or brush my teeth or go to the bathroom or literally do anything. Oh my God. And you'll be so focused that like noises will startle you. In high school, I used to hyper-focus on journalism. I was on newspaper, yearbook, video yearbook, all three of the journalism staffs that we had. And that's all I would ever do constantly. I would hyper-focus almost every single day. And I just remember there are so many times where I would just be so focused and like doing the thing that my teacher would come over and say like, hey Haley, and I'd be like, Hello! I'm just so startled because I'm like in this world where nothing else exists and nothing is distracting me until someone's trying to get my attention, you know? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, things exist besides what I'm doing right now. Wow, I forgot. So you just like get in the zone, and it's not just like an intense focus. And I think that's where people fail to describe it, because people kind of stop there and it makes it sound like, okay, well, you just get really intensely focused sometimes. Like, so do I. Okay, everybody gets intensely focused sometimes. That happens. I think the frequency at which it's happening kind of determines whether it's hyperfocus. Also, if you can control it at all. We can't all control our focus, but if you sit down and try to focus and you're able to, well, that's not hyperfocus. If you sit down and try to focus and half the time your mind's like bing, 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 and the other half the time you're really, really, really intensely focused, okay, that might be hyperfocus, you know? But yeah, it's not just focusing, it's like how you feel when you're doing the thing. So when I hyperfocus, I like get in this zone, this creative zone, and it makes me so happy, and it's like slightly euphoric. Honestly, I feel so happy and so good when I'm hyperfocusing. One time my boyfriend walked in on me and I was on our bed editing. I had been doing it for hours. Clearly I was hyperfocused, and he like was staring at me and I was like, what? And he's like,
you're just smiling right now.
I was like, oh, I am? He's like,
yeah, you're just sitting there like with a huge grin on your face editing.
And I was like, oh. Like, I was just having so much fun. I enjoyed it so much. I was so interested in what I was doing that I'm just like smiling, and I did not even realize. And since he pointed that out, I've noticed that I do that from time to time. You good, bro? Yeah, it just feels really good, like slightly euphoric. I'm not like over the moon, everything's great. I think that's where it like transitions into bipolar disorder. So yeah, that's kind of how I would describe hyperfocus. I have not seen a lot of videos out there about it. I found a really great video on hyperfixation. What's her name? Quinn in the Clouds, that's her name. You guys should definitely check her out. She makes amazing videos. Or I don't know if she goes by she. But yeah, hyperfixation is a little bit different than hyperfocus. Like, hyperfixation is the thing that you're focusing on, and hyperfocus is like what you experience. So I could make a totally different video about that. Anyway, please subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the bell so you'll be notified every time I post. I will be back on Thursday with another happy hour video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you then. Bye.